So we're going to slowly get started, talk a little bit about why we're here, why you're here, hopefully, and give a short introduction about ourselves. So my name is Erik. It's Erik van Buggenhout. If you would ever want to try to pronounce that in English, it's a little bit tricky. I'm uh, I'm Belgian, so yeah, my mother tongue is Dutch, so that's where the name comes from, if you will. It's Flemish. I'm a science instructor. I've been around for a while. I teach primarily the purple team courses, 599, 699. I'm also the author for those courses. And yeah, I do next to Sense. What I also do is I play a role at Enviso, which is a cybersecurity services firm, and I oversee the managed security services there, so typical MDR style stuff. Brian, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself
Sure.
as well.
Sure. My name is Brian Almond. I am principal security researcher with Presidio. I also work in an MDR. I am the technical lead for Presidio's MDR, leading our analyst, threat hunting, and threat research teams. I'm a SANS instructor, newer SANS instructor. I teach Sec 599 in the Purple Team curriculum here with Erik.
Yes, we've been having lots of fun together.
Yes, we have.
Brian is actually from Florida, which is
I
pretty
am from
amazing.
Florida. We have our emotional support gators in the backyard, so we're doing good.
All right, without further ado, so welcome everyone, and let me jump into the topics. Now I'm just noticing that my slide doesn't move, so that's quite interesting. It's a great start to the show. Why doesn't it move? One small second here. I'm just going to refresh my share. So from current slide, so don't worry, I need to share again, that I'm very aware of. Okay, there is just one. I'm just going to make one small change. Okay, yeah. Somehow it was something with the way that it was doing the sharing, so I'm going to share again, and now I can click. My apologies for that. Share it, just a quick test to make sure everyone's awake. There we go. Phishing attacks from delivery to execution, email security and web protection. How can we defend? State of the art modern attacks, and then questions and answers. So a bit of everything, honestly. What is the idea here? Well, it was actually in the abstract of the webcast, but when I was thinking, we were discussing a bit a webcast talking about phishing. Is that actually a good idea in 2025? I was almost going to say 2024, but honestly, we've been phishing is not new, right? It's all over the shop. Everyone knows that phishing is pretty bad, and it still keeps on being one of those very ugly attack vectors, which seems to be well, almost immune. You cannot kill it. It just keeps on coming back. And so what we thought was, okay, it's not a bad idea to actually have a look at um, what is phishing today? What does it look like? How has it evolved? What are the key defenses? What are the controls that we can implement? And what are adversaries doing these days to get around the controls? The good news is, I find, is that we're not standing still. So we're always improving, we're always raising the bar. But of course, and that's already almost a spoiler alert for some of the conclusions, it's a cat and mouse game, right? It keeps on evolving, so it's important to keep up. And that's what we're trying to do here, is give you a bit of a state of the art of where it is now and where it's probably going as well. So I'm first going to start by looking at phishing attacks and just explaining a little bit more about what the phishing attack is like, what they're trying to achieve, or what adversaries are trying to do. Heads up, I'm sure most of you know what happens in phishing, but just a couple of statistics. According to Microsoft Digital Defense Report 2024, it's one of those big threat intel reports. You've got the Verizon DBIR. CrowdStrike has a pretty well-known global threat report. There's obviously mTrend for Mandiant. Usually they have very similar findings. Hopefully, right? It would be a bit weird if they all have different findings. But according to this one, very interesting is that still phishing, and to that extent, or by extension, if you will, social engineering are still very, very prevalent in initial access techniques. So getting that initial foothold, it's still very much a phishing game. So phishing, SMS phishing, voice phishing, if you want to go wild, what's the QR code thing again? Quishing, or what do they call that? So there's a whole bunch of these variations, but very often We're looking there at a form of trickery or social engineering, where adversaries are trying to fool, well, very innocent end users into doing their bidding. Now, the two others that are on the slide, also interesting to mention, but not really the focus for today. Exploiting vulnerabilities in public-facing applications. Well, back in the day when I was young and handsome, I always thought this is going to disappear at one point, right? People having RDP exposed to the internet, right? Port 3389, what could go wrong? Everyone knows not to do that, and right? But still, 2025, these things still happen. Not as frequent as it used to be, but this whole cloud thing has brought a very interesting dynamic where if you're just doing a lift and shift, you might end up with some interesting surprises if you've not configured your security groups, for example, correctly. So that's still a thing. Identity compromise, of course. That's of course the whole thing with the breach credentials being available on the dark web, people reusing passwords, stuff like that. That's still a pretty big one as well. So I think that's also one to take into account. Today, however, the focus is really social engineering and that focus on phishing. Now, what is the ask in phishing? Because I find it always interesting. What do adversaries typically ask for in phishing? Well, most of the time they're looking to get either access to credentials, so to take over an account, or of course getting a payload to run. So those are some of the very big ones. I listed four here on the slide. So running a payload, that could be an executable, could be an Office document. We'll zoom in on that, of course, in a bit. We'll look into a bit more of the details. But running a payload essentially means getting something to run on the victim endpoint, right? That would be one of the key tricks. Approving MFA prompts. So if you have MFA deployed, multi-factor authentication, you better do it in a proper way. We'll discuss that as well in a bit. MFA bombing, stuff like that. Those are typical attack strategies, but an attempt to get a user to approve an MFA prompt to then bypass the implement MFA is a common one. Visiting websites, yeah, just getting someone to visit a malicious website, potentially then trying to abuse a browser flaw, like a browser vulnerability, and running an exploit kit. That would be another attack strategy. And finally, next to all of these technical or the more technical style attacks, just simple document fraud, business email compromise, sending fake invoices, getting people to pay. Because in the end, when we're dealing with cyber criminals, it's about money, right? So they don't necessarily need credentials or payloads. If they can just trick someone into doing a transaction, that would be very helpful for them as well. Very simple here, of course, running a payload. There you go. This is the old school stuff, right? Just hey Erik, there's a new security policy. Do have a look. And then you've got a nice little Office document with the macro included, and that's a classic example of a very typical phish, which I'm going to assume here in the audience, everyone would immediately spot, of course, and say, okay, it's clearly phishing, pretty ugly. That's something that we can definitely deal with. Now, the careful observer here, of course, notices that the domain is not correct, nvs with a 0.eu instead of nviso. So that's very silly, of course, but still often quite can still work. So you'd be surprised that this very classic text strategy can still work. Now, you might say, the more technical people, Erik, hold on, there's a lot of macro controls, and Microsoft has been doubling down on that. Absolutely. We'll talk about that in a second. Brian's going to cover a lot of the controls. So there's absolutely ways to defend against that, but just as an example of a very classic payload. Approving an MFA prompt. So MFA is great. Of course, if you could obtain access to an account, if you would guess a credential, or guess, you probably won't guess the credential, but obtain the credential, try to authenticate, and then just trigger an MFA prompt to be sent to the victim and try to get them to approve the prompt, right? A very simple, insecure configuration of MFA would lead to something like this. Two-step verification. Hey, this is a Google example. Is it you trying to sign in? No, it's not me, or yes. This is an insecure way of doing MFA, because what is the problem? There's no additional factor like a number being shown, of course. We'll talk about that later as well. But there's no link, right? Meaning that if you just bomb a victim with these kind of prompts, like, is it you trying to sign in? The first time they might press no, but after 200 of these, they're probably going to say yes, and they think that something's, misconfigured, right? It could be an issue. Very classic example of that is, of course, the Uber breach in 2022. This was one of the initial attack techniques that they used was actually doing MFA bombing to get an initial access to an account of an IT user. So secure MFA configuration is, of course, a must have. Visiting a website. So that's one of the other big ones, if you will. You might think, okay, but browsers nowadays are patched. And that's true, honestly. Most browsers are quite secure. Nothing is perfect, though. And so browser exploit kits, typical watering hole attacks where they're trying to trick end users to visit a website that could then deliver an exploit to basically compromise or to exploit a vulnerable browser, still happens. And I was actually quite a lot of this material also, and the things that we'll discuss, the defenses and the attacks, they're actually also present in the SANS courseware that we maintain. And I was always looking for a good example of exploit kits, because you used to have things like Angler, not Angler, Rig. Those were the big old exploit kits that were quite well known. But over the last few years, it was always hard to come up with good examples of exploit kits because it was less and less prevalent, or at least less and less publicly known, right? However, very interesting, in October 2024, so not that long ago, they actually identified a pretty nice, well, nice, depends on how you look at it, CVE Mozilla Firefox, which was used or abused by the Russia-aligned APT group known as Romcom, which was pretty impressive because successful attack scenario would allow a victim, well, not allow a victim, allow an adversary to execute arbitrary code without user interaction, typically called a zero-click exploit, if you will. So that was pretty impressive to see. So it also shows, again, the relevance of this. It's not gone, right? It does still happen, and it's something to be aware of. So even just visiting a malicious website can be a risk, even if you're not submitting credentials and such. A word on protection, maybe, Ryan.
All right. I'm going to replace the screen share real quick.
Make sure you can click it, right?
Yeah, I know. Let me know if you can see it. Everybody
Yes,
see it?
good.
All right, great. Okay, defenses. I hope you are all thinking that we're going to give you a silver bullet. We're not. Not on phishing. Phishing is one of these tried and true methods that adversaries are so creative that they're going to find ways to do this. So the best methods are defense in depth methods. And of course, now I can't click. Try it again. There we go. Defense in depth methods. And the first one, and the one that everybody always hates when I bring it up, is end user awareness. Yes, I know you've got that one guy in your org that every time a phishing test comes out, he's clicking that email. But this is a numbers game, right? When you first started doing your user awareness training, probably 20% of your organization were the ones who were clicking that email over and over again. Now it's anywhere from 1 to 4%. So just realize that all of these controls, while they're not foolproof, the idea is to get the numbers down so that the adversary has to hit a bullseye every time to get through. So with the end user awareness training, on top of that, if you have good email and web security to prevent payload delivery and good endpoint controls, things like EDR, application allow listing, execution prevention, then you have a good strategy to prevent most phishing attacks. There's no way you're going to prevent them all. It's just not going to happen. So a note on just what you should have from web security perspective. From an email perspective, you absolutely by now should have SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, right? These are traditional spam prevention controls, but they can also prevent email spoofing in a lot of cases. So SPF, DKIM, DMARC, these are table stakes, right? You absolutely should have these. And now that most email services with the, inception of Office 365 being cloud driven, these are a lot easier to set up than they used to be, right? It's not as hard to set up DKIM. It used to be a pain on Exchange, but it's not too bad on Office 365. The next control you probably need is sender identification. So sender identification are hints that you can give your users. Think of it as hints. You're goading them in the right direction to make a good decision on a phishing email. And we'll go into that a little bit more in depth here in a minute. But think of banners that are applied to external email. URL and link analysis, this is another area. You should have something analyzing links when they're sent in, right? Absolutely should have something analyzing those links, running them against threat intelligence ensuring that those links are valid and that you haven't seen them associated with a previous attack, right? Now, of course, this is never foolproof, but it is another control that can help you. And then attachment analysis. If you're not already doing this, you're probably hosed. But attachment analysis, simple malware checking as things are sent in that are attachments to email. Now, you really should be blocking certain MIME types as well, blocking things like ISOs coming in. There's no real reason for an ISO to be coming into your organization. But your attachment analysis should be a combination of blocking certain types as well as sandboxing. So when that executable comes in, if it's a zip, it needs to be expanded, if possible to do so, and run through a sandbox, just to ensure that they're not doing some kind of craziness like, hey, we zipped this up 7 times. So just be aware that this is a defense in-depth process. Now, controls on the sender or sender, hints, like I mentioned earlier, these are hints you're giving your end user so that they make good decisions, right? As you can see here on the left of the slide is a typical phish. This is a pretty real looking phish though. But notice here we have some people who receive this message don't often get email from Select USA, Belgium, trade.gov. I'll underline this so everybody can see it right there. That's an example of an unfamiliar sender alert. If you set up unfamiliar sender alerts in Microsoft Outlook or Google Workspace, and this user has never seen this sender before, it's a hint that you're giving them to help them make a good decision. Same thing with external email banners, right? This email originated outside of the organization. Now in my organization, we make this bright red so that there's no chance that somebody's going to accidentally know that, well, I didn't see it. Oh yeah, you did. It's bright red. It's in your face. But point being is you're giving the user hints to make good decisions. If you've educated them and they're pretty good at spotting a phish, this can make or break whether they click or not, right? So you want to make sure that these are very obvious to them and that, each one of these is applied if possible to do in your environment. Now, display name mismatches, this one is not as common as the other two. Most everybody should be able to do an external email banner and an unfamiliar sender alert. Display name mismatches, you might need another suite of products to do this, but ensuring that you have these 3 helps users make good decisions. So one of the next controls we have is safe links. If you're an Office 365 user, I highly recommend you have safe links turned on. What safe links is safe links is a just-in-time scanning of the user's link, of the user's link when they click on it. Now, what does this buy you? Number 1, at minimum, the user clicked the link. You 100% know they clicked the link because when they click that link, it generates a log, right? If they were disconnected from your network and you have a mobile workforce in multiple different locations around the world, you might not know they clicked the link. So this verifies that at minimum. At maximum, it will just in time, when they click it, say, yes, this is good, bad, and it might actually stop a phish. Now, I have seen when the user clicked this, sometimes up to 24 hours later, Microsoft coming back and saying, hey, this was a bad link. You might want to go check that out. But if you don't have safe links turned on, you can't do any of that, right? Now, the drawback here, it does require a Defender for Office 365 license. You must have Defender for Office 365 to get this. But this is one of these things that if you're using 365, it should be a ubiquitous control for you. It also works within Teams and other Office applications as well. So applying safe links where you can is a very good idea. Now, along these same lines, safe attachments, it's exactly like it sounds. It is scanning and sandboxing of an attachment as it comes through Office 365. This one has 4 different modes. Don't use off, right? Don't use off. Monitor, you're monitoring the attachments, right? It just tells you, hey, we got the attachment. Block is the default. This is the one that you really should be using. And it has 2 values inside of it, standard and strict. They are just like they sound. Strict is more stringent and blocks more email. If you are having problems with this, you can move it back to standard. Standard is the default, right? The default. There's another setting called dynamic delivery. This one is interesting. If you have messages that you think are sensitive and they must get through on time, you can use dynamic delivery. It delivers the text of the message to the end user, but it won't deliver the attachment until they click it, and then it goes through the scan to verify that it is fully clean, right? So dynamic delivery, another piece of this that you can use in your arsenal, but you may have many different controls that do this same thing. You just want to make sure that you have something that is scanning the attachments, running them through a sandbox, right? All right, next control, smart screen. So smart screen, when you open an attachment or you click a link, your browser is going to go through the smart screen client or the network protection client to the smart screen cloud service, right? That's how it works. Now, the difference here is that first-party browsers, Edge and Internet Explorer, they go through the smart screen client. Chrome and Firefox, third-party browsers, go through the network protection client to get the smart screen cloud service. With first-party browsers, you get the entire URL scan, right? With third-party browsers, you just get the fully qualified domain name. So that can make or break in the world of cloud, right? What if that link is Microsoft.com? Well, of course that's safe, but what if it's Microsoft.com blob storage, something like that, right? And it is malicious. Smart Screen Client will scan that. Network Protection Client will not. So this has been a decision point for many of my customers around moving to first-party browsers, right? They have moved to Edge or have moved away from Chrome because of this extra abilities that Edge has for scanning. And especially now with Chromium being universally compatible with Chrome, most of their plugins move over and they have no issue. The only issue they have is Edge in general. You know, the customers tend to be more stressed out because, well, they're always on Edge. Bad joke, I know. Keep moving. All right, let me, I've got a raised hand that I can't see, sorry. All right, endpoint controls. So let's talk about how phishing comes through. When phishing comes through, a phish is typically going to use scripting because it's easy to encapsulate in a phish email. Now, this is a bunch of different types of payloads, but most of the time what we see is we'll see classics, right? HTA files, VBS, DocM, XLSXM, JavaScript, VBScript, VBE, those types of scripting languages that they can easily embed in a document that will give them something, right? A reverse shell, HTA files, you can encapsulate even like Metasploit payloads, like Meterpreter. I just saw one this week about somebody that had a Meterpreter encapsulated in an HTA that was a phish. So these are your most common ways of those scripting languages coming in via phish. Now, WSH or Windows Script Host, by default, it's two executables that will run, CScript and WScript. CScript is the command line version of WScript. They are the same, they run the same code. They run JS, VBS, VBE. But the adversary could run both, right? So if you see Adobe opening CScript or opening WScript, you might want to check that out, right? That could be bad. Same thing with HTA files. Now, HTA files, these run mshta.exe. I have, as of late, seen this be more of a problem than used in corporate environments. mshta.exe running at all in my MDR, that's a trigger. We're going to let you know about that, right? Because it's just not common anymore. Those HTML applications were made for Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is not used anymore, right? So you shouldn't be seeing HTA applications that much. Now, finally, Visual Basic for applications. This is the one that has been killer for so many years. It is a language called VBA that they embed into documents. And that is super powerful, right? That language can call Windows APIs directly. That means it can call virtual alloc. It can call virtual protect. It can do process hollowing. It can do all of the madness that some of the more advanced languages can do. right in Office, but it's embedded in Office. Now, this one, typically you're going to see things like, imagine an Excel document calling PowerShell. That's probably bad, right? So it's a good way of detecting it. Same thing, calling cmd.exe. So it's a good first step detection, but Microsoft has put quite a few controls around VBA, and we'll talk about some of those here in a minute. But okay, user clicks a Phish. Is there a way we can stop things from being executed? Can we stop C script? Can we stop W script? Yes. You can use application controls. This is application allow listing or application execution prevention. The first one of these, and many of you may have heard of it before, is App Blocker. App Blocker has been around since the late days of Windows 7, early days of Windows 10. The biggest difference between App Blocker and its successor, WDAC, which is Windows Defender for Application Control, is that policies are available on a per user and per group basis for App Blocker. They are not available on a per user and per group basis for WDAC. Realize when you apply WDAC, it is system-wide, right? Now, there is some really good advantages to using WDAC because in particular, you can see all these kernel mode policies, per app rules, managed installers, reputation-based intelligence, multiple policy support. All of these are available in WDAC that are not available in App Blocker. Now, the reason that I tend to stress my customers look at App Blocker, though, is this. Driver files. App Blocker can control driver files. A driver file can go right into your kernel. And your kernel can control protected processes. This is how Mimicat shuts down protected processes. It has the Mimi driver.sys, right? If you can control driver files, you can prevent EDR bypass in a lot of ways. Now, there are, of course, ways to get around that too. But if you combine these two technologies, you can stop known bad from executing in your environment. And as a matter of fact, there is a list that Microsoft provides for WDAC that is just the lull bins. Block all the lull bins, right? Okay, that's a great way to go about it, right? I'm just blocking the lull bins. I'm not blocking anything else. You don't have to run these in what we call application whitelisting mode, right? Where you're only allowing the executable to run if it's been seen before. You can have it more in a, I just want to block these executables mode. So definitely a good control. All right. One of my favorite tricks. I love this. When they invented PowerShell, Microsoft in their infinite wisdom had learned from some of their mistakes. And when you go click on a PS1 file, it doesn't immediately open PowerShell and execute. Well, what if you could do that with all these other languages? Well, what we're showing you here, you can. This just changes the association of JScript right here, like JScript, VBS, VBE, HTA, to a text file and runs Notepad. So instead of when a user clicks on it, it runs, it just opens Notepad. So in areas where you have high stakes and you're worried about users clicking on Phish or running these types of documents, you can create this XML, attach it to a GPO, and have it apply. And then when they double click that file and it's got C script in it, it's just going to pop up Notepad. So genius little trick here, very helpful. All right, let's keep going with VBA here. So gotta turn my drawer off. VBA, one of the things that VBA uses is mark of the web, or what Office uses more likely is mark of the web. Right. So when you open a file that contains VBA code or a VBA macro, Windows uses mark of the web to determine what to do with it. Is this file trusted? Where did it come from? Protected view is a view that basically when it opens, you can't do anything with it. It's just read only. And macro restrictions are, does it run the embedded macro? Even if the macro says to auto run, does it run it, right? The enable content button. Many of you have seen that before, right? Mark of the web controls this. If mark of the web is not present, then it goes back to the defaults. If mark of the web is not present, It might run the macro restrictions. It might give you the enable content button instead of blocking. Right? These settings are all configured in your Office Trust Center. So I urge you to take a look at your Office Trust Center and determine which of these controls matter for your environment. Now, Microsoft has made some decisions for you, and I'll show you that in a little bit, but just understand mark of the web, extremely important. And you need to understand what, when it's sent into you, is applying mark of the web and what isn't. The most recent 7-zip vulnerability, you guys probably heard about it. It was 2025-0411. And what it was, what adversaries were doing was they were encapsulating a 7-zip payload 2 times. That's all they were doing. Inside there, it would not pass mark of the web from the file that was encapsulated the second time all the way down. So we suddenly started seeing this used in Ukraine, right? For phishing. So you should understand when stuff is being shipped into you, does mark of the web apply? Does it come down with the file? Now, more on mark of the web. What is mark of the web? Mark of the web is an alternate data stream that is applied to a file when it's downloaded. Internet Explorer, Edge, Firefox, Chrome, they all apply mark of the web. And it is simply that alternate data stream that is this zone identifier right here. So this zone identifier, right there. It will always be a zone ID of 3 if it came from the internet. Now, the mere existence of this determines the controls, though. Right? But it's also an interesting artifact from a forensics perspective. This refer URL right here is the refer. It's where you clicked previous to getting this file. And then the host URL is where you downloaded it from. So if you have a Phish and you know it's malicious, you can see where they downloaded from with this, if they haven't erased it already. Right? Now, users can delete this. And one of the ways they can delete it is by right-clicking and choosing Properties, clicking Unblock, and hitting Apply. If they do that, it completely erases mark of the web. But in doing so, they've also erased their protection, right? So just realize when something's shipped into you, you need to understand where mark of the web will be applied and where it won't. If I zip up an ISO file, it's odds are that's going to get through because you're only blocking ISO files. But that ISO, the file inside of it, will probably not have mark of the web on it. So things you need to pay attention to from that perspective. All right, my favorite thing Microsoft did in 2024. In 2024, they started blocking VBA macros on files coming from the internet. This is great. It really stopped phishing in a lot of ways because they would just ship in a document with macros, hope you would click on it, and away they would go. Well, now they have to do mark of the web bypass to make that work, right? If mark of the web is present on a file, then this is what you see. You will see the banner here with security risk. And then if the user clicks on it, it sends them to a nice little video for user awareness training, helping them understand, hey, this is malicious. Now, if mark of the web is not present and they click on this, then it will give them enable content, right? So then you just trick them into doing enable content, right? Which you can just tell them, hey, I need you to enable content. They'll click it. So ensuring that mark of the web is available is a great thing. But I'm really thankful that Microsoft did this because it really raised the bar for people who were doing phishing, as VBA was just it for years. Okay, so I've talked to you about a bunch of controls. I'm going to kick it back over to Erik. Erik is going to show you some of the state of the art for how adversaries are getting by some of this.
Thanks, Brian. Now let's aim for a flawless handover on the slide. So indeed, quite a couple of defenses, and as I mentioned, I'm an eternal optimist. So we are getting better, and I'm quite convinced that we're on the right path. But as Brian also rightfully indicated, there's no golden solution. We'll never fix this entirely because it's just so creative. And some of these, I look at these attack strategies and I just think, wow, amazing. So a couple of examples of creative techniques. So this is from December 2024. well-known ransomware group Black Basta, and they started not doing MFA bombing because that's been well known for quite a while, but they actually did email or spam bombing. Now, what's the idea? They just start sending well, spam, which looks like reset your password, email verification. So a whole bunch of ugly looking emails, which not they don't necessarily include a payload. They're just designed to give the victim a feeling of being overwhelmed because there's so many mails coming in, and of course they want to get them into the mailbox. So that's why they don't include a malicious payload in them. There's no attachment. It's just spam. They're throwing a whole bunch of mails at a specific person, at the target. And then next up, what they do is they try to reach out. Could be through Teams. Imagine that they can talk to that in your organization they can talk to external users, or even by phone. They present themselves as being IT support, and they would say, there seems to be a concern because there's a lot of spam coming through to your email account. Let us help you fix it. And then, of course, there it comes. It's like, oh, but you will need to give us access. You'll need to run a specific payload. Could be a legitimate remote support tool like AnyDesk or something like that. But very interesting and a very creative way of doing it. Because at first, this might not trigger some of your detections because you're not looking for spam, right? You're looking for payloads and evil emails, things that indicate that there's an evil intent. But this was quite successful, and they applied that in quite a few of their attack strategies, which is interesting to see. The other one is captchas, and this one I really had to look at it two times to say, well, are they really doing that? And it's actually it's quite. This is one of the wow ones. It's like very creative, very nice. So what is it? It's basically a fake captcha verification. Now we all know captchas, right? It's the "Are you human?" and then you click yes, basically to prove that you're a human. But what do they do here? There's basically a web page that looks like a fake captcha verification. So the user thinks, oh, I need to submit a captcha, I need to do something. What happens though in the background, when you click the button to verify, it copies a PowerShell command to the clipboard. But then what does the thing tell you? What does the web page tell you? It says, you need to press a number of buttons to confirm also that you're human. And what buttons do you have to press? Well, you have to press Control R, which is of course run. It's the you open a run prompt, Control V, and then enter. So Control V, you basically paste in the command and then you run enter. So you're basically getting users to run the payload themselves. It's wild. And then of course what happens in this specific case, MSHTA, which was already mentioned by Brian, is used to download the payload, execute JS script. Further stage PowerShell execution, download the Luma Stealer payload, process injection happens, and of course they can go to town and they can start grabbing everything that they would like. So quite an interesting attack strategy. Again here, defense in depth, right? Because okay, this is creative, but some of the controls that Brian mentioned, like blocking MSHTA, for example, if you would have some controls or that JS file, there are things you can do here, right? So again, defense in depth and making sure that you have the right controls enabled. This is a bit more detail, same scenario, right? But here, just I'm actually showing here now very specifically what that looks like. So that's the CAPTCHA page, which says, hey, verifying you are human, and here are your verification steps. The moment that they click the I'm not a robot, what happens, of course, you can see there the JavaScript. It's actually copying that PowerShell command to the clipboard. And of course, if you do Windows R, and sorry, I said Control R first. It's of course Windows R to open the run prompt, and then if you do Control V, then you paste it in and hit Enter. So that's a nice one, very creative. Uh, Things get worse before they get better. This is one I actually got from a malware traffic analysis. Excellent website, by the way. Malware traffic analysis. They keep track of a lot of these campaigns, and they have always nice analyses where they show, look, here's a new attack technique. That's the payload that they're dropping. This is a fake browser update, so it looks like, hey, you need to update your Microsoft Edge, and then very silly, but it basically hands you an update.zip, and inside the update.zip is an update.js. And again, of course, that's the payload when double clicked, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So keep on going. Now, Brian mentioned mark of the web, and mark of the web is truly an pretty important control. It's one of the big ones because mark of the web is of course the one that allows, it facilitates or it allows Windows to understand that this file was downloaded from the internet or not. So a lot of the controls are based on it. And Brian mentioned the VBA controls, of course, around it, where Microsoft is now blocking by default when it notices that the file was downloaded from the internet. But There's also, if you just, I'm not sure if you've seen it, if you would download that JS file and mark of the web is there, if you double click it, it also opens up a small warning for the user to say, hey, watch out, this is downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to run this? So adversaries would, of course, like to bypass that, right? They want to avoid warnings because that's a little bit annoying. So mark of the web bypass strategies. This is quite a hot topic these days. Even last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, there was a CVE in 7-zip, which involved a mark of the web bypass, which we'll actually demo in just a bit. We have that in the demo that we're going to show. But what's the idea? Some file types, typically archive-ish types, like for example, zip files, ISO files, already mentioned by Brian, VHD files, so virtual hard disk files, they sometimes they don't consistently apply the mark of the web on files that are inside them. So sounds weird. What do I mean by that? Imagine that you download update.zip. The update.zip will always have the mark of the web, but inside the update.zip, there's, for example, update.js. When you then extract that update.js, it's important that the mark of the web also applies to the extracted file, right? Because the JS file was technically not downloaded. It was part of a zip file that was downloaded. So the responsibility of setting that mark of the web is, of course, with the client software that is doing that extraction. And this is an important one. So there are often, you can have small vulnerabilities that pop up, but adversaries are very well aware of this. ISO files used to be a very good example of that. Microsoft applied some security patches, though, for their standard. If you double click an ISO when it opens it, it now applies the mark of the web more consistently. So again, cat and mouse game, this one. So let's do a quick demo, as I said, just to show you. I did record it. I cheated a bit just to make sure that it, well, don't mess with the demo gods, right? So let me pause my screen here for a second and open my video. There we have it. Excellent. Share. Voila. I think you should be seeing my video file, I hope now.
We do.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian, for the confirmation. So here's a very classic little Phish. Hi there, I'm sending you this secret document. Please have a look, securedfileportal.com, and then something. Now we can argue about, is that a good Phish or not? Well, I'll leave it up to your creativity to make it look nicer, but that's fundamentally something that could happen. Now, on the domain names, we didn't put that in the slides as explicitly, but Brian, of course, discussed things like smart screen and all of that, reputation-based checking of links and all of that. What adversaries these days often do is they basically they buy domains which already have a reputation, which have expired, and then they basically get them. And there's quite a few GitHub tools around. Domain Hunter is one of them, which helps you hunt for those kind of domain names. So the idea is make sure that you get a domain name which is not new. That's one. So it already has a pre-built reputation and history. So it's not going to be blocked that easily by things like Smart Screen or by proxy controls and stuff like that. So securedfileportal.com, and then you can see that there's a nice little link to an HTML. So if you open that up, very silly. It's a nice visual, Microsoft OneDrive, download starting. And we can see, well, obviously you don't want to call your document, your file, MOTW bypass. This is, of course, on purpose to show you very clearly what's going on. We're actually downloading a 7-zip file, and then you'll see we're actually going to showcase the vulnerability that was recently discovered, which was pretty interesting. So we're downloading 2 files. So I'm just doing that manually here. So a bit of artistic liberty. So we're downloading an MOTW and MOTW bypass just to show the difference between a vulnerable version of 7-zip, which did not correctly apply the mark of the web, and the patched one. So this is the vulnerability that existed 2 weeks ago for which a CVE was released. So what happens, you'll see here now, let's open those files up. There we go. We're just opening, yes. So this is, just to be clear, to confirm, this is the vulnerable version of 7-zip that we're using here. So if you're, what do you see in here? So in the secret document mark of the web, what do we see there? Document.pdf.lnk. Guess what? That's a shortcut file. It's not a PDF file. I'll show you in a second what's actually behind it. So what is the payload in that shortcut file? But you'll see now, if we click that, exactly this is what I mentioned, the security warning. That's mark of the web in action. It's basically Microsoft saying, hey, hold on, this was downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to run it? Obviously, if you're good at phishing, you might convince the user to still go, right? But an adversary would prefer to not have that warning, right? It's always easier to not have that second step where the user again has to do something to allow the payload to run. Okay, so fine. Let's have a look at the other one. So what you see here in the one on the left, you have secret document motw bypass.7zip, but it has secret underscore document .7z. So it's an 7zip in a 7zip, right? So we put it's a nested 7zip, if you will, and that's where the vulnerability was actually, which is pretty fun, right? It's always in the simple things. So if you open that 7zip document, the same document.pdf.lnk is in there, and if you now double click that one, boom. So you see the payload that ran. Uh, you know what they say, right? If you see like a black screen that disappears, you have a problem. So that was just a very quick showcase to show you that's a nice way of. Yeah, we're opening the calc just to show you very visually. You could, of course, do something much more malicious. That would be the point. And here you can see the version of 7zip there. That's the unpatched version. So again, that's a vulnerability from 2 weeks ago, I think. So if you have 7zip, make sure that you're using the latest version, because otherwise you might end up with a small issue. Now let's have a look at that file there. So that document.pdf, if you right click it, go to the properties. It's a little bit small. I'm very sorry about that. Let me see. Can I zoom in? Sorry, I'm an amateur with this media players. I'm not really sure. But what it is, it's secured file portal, and you can see it's actually fetching a PS1 file, so a PowerShell script. And it's you can see it piping that through to IX, which is invoke expression. So it's basically pulling another stage from that website. In this case, it's just launching calc afterwards, because we're not really this is just a demo. We don't want to actually infect someone, but it's a nice showcase to just show you how that could look like. I'm actually going to put it in Notepad now, so that's nice. So there you see it as well. So that's the entire thing. So you can see that it's PowerShell system.net.webclient.download string. It's getting that PS1 payload and then feeding that into IX to execute it. So I guess that makes sense, but it's just a small demo of one of the ways that you can, again, cat and mouse game. I think that's the key thing. Let me jump back to my slides and continue the presentation. One more thing I want to mention. Wait, Erik, what about AI? Right? We didn't talk about AI. Well, on purpose, kind of, because AI doesn't really change the dynamic here that much. It can help adversaries for crafting better phishing mails, if you will. It can also help defenders. What we use, for example, is we use AI to better judge user-reported phishing emails, for example, to figure out, is this phishing, yes or no. But fundamentally, it doesn't make a big impact on what we just discussed, right? There will still be ways to fool users, and of course you need controls, but you don't need a magic AI solution to defeat phishing. It's not going to help. It can help both adversaries and defenders, but it doesn't fundamentally change the balance of the situation, if you will. I just thought it's important to mention that, because otherwise people would say, "Oh, wait, Erik, you didn't talk about AI." Couple of conclusions, maybe, right?
So as I mentioned before, defense in depth. You have to have a defense in depth approach here, because as we showed how creative adversaries have become, tricking you into hitting Windows R. Making sure you have a good endpoint and have all those controls that we mentioned, it greatly reduces the likelihood of an adversary getting in. Like I mentioned earlier, they have to hit a bullseye, right? They have to get through all of these controls, and then they have to hit someone in your org that's been trained, that has already gone through user awareness training, that's still going to click it, right? So you've given the user hints, you have put endpoint controls in place, and you're just trying to make sure that you have as little likelihood as possible for them to be successful. Now, does that mean they won't be? No, they probably will be eventually, but it's not going to be something you're chasing 24/7, 365. So as we've said, this is not going to be a problem that can be solved overnight. It's going to be something that's continually evolving. We see new attacks all the time. I think what we're really going to start seeing most is more mark of the web bypasses, more creative mark of the web bypasses. We may see another rise in drive-by download style attacks or watering hole attacks coming back, but initial access vectors, probably going to start seeing more exploitation of externally facing things as the initial access vector, as that's ticked up quite a bit as phishing has gotten harder to do. But yeah, if you enjoyed this webcast and you want to learn more from either myself or Erik, come take one of our classes, Sec 599. I teach Sec 599. I'll be teaching it in virtual for Orlando. And then Sec 699. I'm not sure who has the next run of that. Do you know, Erik? But
I don't
yeah,
know by heart. It could be either me
yeah.
or Bryce. But what we do there as well, which is good fun, is we actually do some more labs ourselves, which is always good fun. Because now you have to hear to us talk and make some very terrible jokes. I'll just throw one in to finish. I've overused this one, but it's still good, so I'll do it again. Where did the hacker go? So where did the hacker go? Yes, I'm almost embarrassed to say they ransomware. Yes. Brian, the awkwardness. See,
I think I've heard
excellent
that one
enemy.
about 30 times already.
Still good. Any
Good,
questions
yes.
for us, though? I don't know if you have time for a few questions, maybe through the panel, some remarks, things that you would want to.
I saw some questions in chat. Let's see. Regarding sender identification, do you recommend changing the banner format periodically? Yeah, if you can change the banner periodically to make sure that your end users, it's catching their eye, that is an important thing if you can do that, because the users get used to seeing the same thing all the time and their brain just ignores it, right? So yeah, absolutely. Changing the banner, definitely a good idea. Let's see. Is AppLocker still viable? Yes, AppLocker is still viable. You can use AppLocker and WDAX simultaneously, and I do recommend you do so in certain scenarios where you have users that need AppLocker applied versus applying something to the entire computer. I do prefer WDAC though. WDAC has better controls. If you can get your policy right, it is the successor, and it's harder to get by than AppLocker as well. AppLocker, there are a lot of known bypasses. Let's see. You want to answer the AI one, Erik?
I don't see it.
It
Is it
says,
in the
how do
general chat?
attackers, it's in the chat. It says, how do attackers use
Yeah.
machine learning or AI to create more convincing phishing emails, and how
Okay.
easy, difficult is it to combat them?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good question. It's technically I actually have a presentation, but I didn't put it in here. That there's imagine you go to ChatGPT. Very simple, you would say, "Hey, can you write me a phishing mail?" Chances are that it's going to say, "Oh no, I cannot do that because of ethics and all of this." Very easy, of course, to get around it and to say, "Ah, but I'm doing it's as part of an awareness campaign, and it's not going to be used for malicious intent." And then you can easily convince it to come up with a nice phishing mail that looks quite good. So that's one way, very simple. The other one is, of course, deepfakes. The whole the state where we are today with deepfakes is pretty impressive. From a social engineering perspective, it makes it all even more. It's even easier to trick users. How easy, difficult is it to combat it? It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy topic, and I think this is it's a bigger topic than just phishing. With the rise of AI, it becomes much easier, of course, to impersonate people to make it look like something is real, which is not. So getting detections in place for that is going to be a tricky one.
Another AI one. Let's see. With increasing use of AI-driven phishing attacks such as deepfake audio, video, and highly personalized spear phishing emails via large language models, how do modern behavioral-based detection systems differentiate? Quite honestly, they don't. This is where AI is ahead of the game. If you're making deepfakes and you're using voice identification in any way, it can all be faked. One of the things that I've seen adversaries do is they'll use deepfakes to trick users into doing actions. This is where AI is ahead of the phishing game. And if an adversary is that determined to get into your organization, they're going to. There's no question. So it's just a matter of time. Now, controls may catch up, but as far as deepfakes and AI is concerned, that adversary, number one, it takes quite a bit to get that level of AI to where they can do that. That's not, you can't just throw that into ChatGPT. But also, just understand that they're a very determined attacker. Know what those particular things are. The one where I saw this fairly recently was an MFA bypass one, where they had the initial credentials and they tried to get an MFA token reset, and they actually deep faked the person and tried to do a video call. So I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty novel. But just in general, this is an area where from phishing and initial access, defenders are still trying to catch up.
I think if you want, I can cover the two others. Simply put, security keys 502. That's very much an effective control to improve MFA. So if you're looking at evil Jinx style attacks, there a proper implementation of 502 is quite capable. So absolutely, that would reduce the attack surface. The other one here on organizations prioritize email security, attachment scanning, download protections. Phishing tactics have evolved to target SMS, QR codes, and social media. So what are the blind spots there? So simply put, those target the SMSs, QR codes, and social media. At the end of the day, they're still going to try to get access to some of your corporate data, right? How could they do that? Even if it's SMS or QR codes. QR code is just another link, right? So it's a link. Someone is opening it. So there are still the browser controls that we mentioned, for example, are still highly effective and still relevant. Social media, well, if there same thing there, if there's a link that gets clicked, endpoint protection is another one. So if it always boils down to the same couple of things. They try to lure someone into visiting an evil website or an evil location where they can then convince them to put in something. So MFA is important because of breach credentials. But same thing at the end of the day, and that's why I use that slide on what is the ask, what are they trying to achieve. They want to either run a payload on the system, they want to either compromise the identity of the user, so to get them to trick their credentials. So that's about awareness. So the controls that we mentioned, and it's on purpose that we use these, they apply to all of it, because at the end of the day, that's still where the adversary is going. How do you tackle bypass organizations, email or spam filtering? I think it's a bit of a combination of what we discussed. It's about because the controls that Brian looked at, there's a lot of reputation-based stuff. Okay, it's an evil domain, it's a known bad domain, it's a payload that is known bad. It's a imagine that you send, for example, payload.exe. That's not going to pass through your email filters, right? Because of the MIME type. But if you can make it look sufficiently benign, that's how it is. So it's a bit of a broad question. So it's also a bit of a broad answer, but there's many ways to do it, right?
Well,
it's about yeah. Very good. Brian.
Also, as you mentioned, things like Domain Hunter, where they buy URLs that already have a prefabricated reputation and send from that. That's one of the ways they get by that. So just quite simply, making sure your URL reputation filters are tight versus just using the defaults, right? Put things in strict mode. That can certainly help.
It's perfect timing. And then
yeah,
for all I can say is that's a night for me. It's 7 p.m. here, so I'm going to enjoy a little drink, some dinner, and maybe I'll see you later. Thanks all, Brian, for being here with me. Good fun.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us. Hope you found it useful, and looking forward to meet you. Who knows, at the Sans course, at the conference, somewhere in the street, accidentally. Just say hi. We don't bite.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.